honored to stand before you today as a representative of Afrikindness UK as we embark on a significant collaboration with the National Association of Proprietors of Private School, NAPS, in Nigeria. Together, we are determined to make a lasting impact on the Nigerian education landscape, and we couldn't be more thrilled to join forces in celebrating Children's Day. This year's theme for Children's Day in Nigeria is investing in our future, is investing in our children, and it perfectly encapsulates the essence of our partnership and the goals we aim to achieve. At Afrikindness, we firmly believe that investing in the education of children and the well-being of children is key to securing a brighter future for Nigeria. So through our capacity building workshop today for teachers and parents, we are taking a proactive step towards investing in our children. And by equipping educators and caregivers with the necessary tools and techniques to foster a culture of inclusive education, we are laying a solid foundation for their growth and development. We fully understand the critical role that teachers and parents play in shaping the minds and the hearts of children, and it's our collective responsibility to provide them with the required knowledge and skills needed to create an inclusive learning environment. So in celebrating the Children's Day this year, and in collaboration with NAPS, Afrikindness has brought together seasoned experts, educators, and trained teachers who will lead various capacity building programs designed to benefit teachers, parents, and ultimately the children. And by investing in the professional growth of our educators and teachers and empowering our parents with valuable insights and strategies, we're ensuring that our children receive the support that they need to thrive. Furthermore, our partnership with NAPS extends beyond the workshop itself. Afrikindness is proud to contribute to the NAPS Children's Day essay competition by offering technical support as well. And we recognize the immense talent and creativity within our Nigerian youth. And by nurturing their skills through initiatives like this, we're providing them with the opportunities to shine and to realize their full potential. At Afrikindness, our mission is to foster positive racial identity development and promote kindness in children and young people. So by organizing this free capacity building training workshop for teachers in Nigeria, we're holding in celebration of Children's Day, we're taking a significant step towards fulfilling our mission. And we understand that investing in the professional development of teachers directly impacts the quality of education and the holistic development of children in Nigeria. So throughout this workshop, teachers and educators will gain invaluable knowledge, skills, and tools to create inclusive learning environments that cater to the diverse needs of their students. They will learn effective teaching strategies and techniques, identify and address barriers to learning, and acquire adaptive teaching methods and classroom styles to meet the needs of all their learners. I can say categorically that the benefits of this training extend beyond this workshop itself. And participants will receive an international certificate upon attendance and completion of a post-training survey affirming their dedication to professional growth. Moreover, they would also gain unlimited support from the Afrikindness education team. They would have access to global resources and materials that would enhance their teaching careers, and they would get regular updates on Afrikindness training and events. And all this will be done in collaboration with NAPS. So as we embark on this journey together, I invite all teachers, all educators to actively engage in this training, ask your questions, use the Q&A to ask your questions, and it will be answered by our educators. Share your views using the comment section, take advantage of the expertise and the resources available to you. Together, let us create a nurturing and inclusive educational environment where every child has the opportunity to thrive. So once again, I express my gratitude, and on behalf of the Board of Trustees and the Executive Board of Afrikindness, we're extending our gratitude to NAPS Nigeria for their collaboration and support. It is through partnership like this that we can drive positive change in education and empower the future generation of children and young people in Nigeria. Thank you, and may this workshop be the catalyst for transformational growth in our educational system in Nigeria. Thank you very much. My name is Bumi Olabi. Thank you. We will start this workshop now. I hope you're all excited. I am excited. We have over 300 participants already on the call, and we're expecting more. I think we have over 1,700 teachers and educators registered. So we expect more to come in. Use the chat forum to tell us where you're joining from. I think I still remember some places in Nigeria, Lagos, Port Harcourt, wherever you're joining from, just use the chat section to type in your comments. It's so great to have you all here, and we're looking for an exciting and an informative session. So at the moment, I'm going to hand over to our team of educators who will take us through the session. And I'm going to be handing over to Sophia Obolen, who is our Afrikindness education team lead. Over to you, Sophia.
Thank you very much, Bumi. Thank you for everyone that's already online. I'm excited to be here with you today. I hope you can hear me really clearly. If you can hear me, give me a shout, say whoop, whoop. I can hear you. Type in the chats so that I know that you are live from wherever you're joining in from. I can see the chat is alive. Lots of people from Lagos. Oh, I can see your whoop, whoop. Thank you very much. My name is Sophia Obolen, and I am a teacher, so that's my identity. And today I am going to be starting the workshop, and we'll be looking at inclusion. So very quickly in the chat, what is inclusion? What do you know is inclusion? So if you just type that up whilst we get ourselves ready to learn. What is inclusion? Inclusion, someone says inclusion is getting involved. Well done. Another person says inclusion is the act of carrying the learners along. That's good. Oh, somebody says inclusion is integrating. Very interesting. Okay, keep it coming, please. Keep it coming. Inclusion is the act of ensuring that everyone is carried along. That's fantastic. Keep it coming, please. Inclusion is belonging. Okay. A lot of to carry along. Well done. Really, really interesting. And when we looked at the pre-training survey that we sent out, we had the same kind of similar responses, people saying that inclusion is being carried along and things like that. So I'm going to unpack that a lot more over the next 20 minutes, and I need you to just follow me really closely because I am going to be leading us somewhere with this. And whilst I'm getting that ready, I'm just going to see if we can share our slides, but if we can't, that's fine with them. I will be able to carry along still. Thank you very much for putting the slide up. Okay, so let's go. So before I start, I'm going to try to see if I remember some of my greetings in some of our Nigerian languages. So, ekabo, dalu, obokia. All of those are the languages I think I still remember in telling you welcome to this amazing event. And it is my way of getting into looking at inclusion. So to start with, I'll say a really quick story of my grandmother. So she could speak about 6 different Nigerian languages. And the reason she could do that was for her survival. She was a grown woman, a grown adult during the Civil War, and she lived in one part of the country and had to go to another part of the country. And the way things worked then, from what she said to me, was that for you to be able to cross from one end to the other, it meant that you needed to speak the language of wherever it was you're trying to cross into, because you didn't know who you were going to meet on the way. And so that meant that she had to learn the languages as she went along. And for her, it wasn't just learning the languages now, it was getting to know the culture of the people, getting to know what they like to eat, getting to know the way they dress. And all of that then kind of formed the adult that she became. So in her old age, she could converse in many languages. If someone was speaking Igbo, she'd be able to speak Igbo. Someone was speaking Yoruba, she'd be able to do that really well. Someone was speaking Hausa, she would be fluent in it. And for me, that is an inspiration. She continues to be an inspiration to me today. Another more recent example is the winner of the 2019 Teacher of the Year Award. She is a teacher in England, and she's a teacher in a part of England where it is very diverse. And she said she had to learn how to say hello in 20 different languages. Now, one of those things is what made her qualify to be Teacher of the Year. Now, bringing that into where we are today in looking at inclusion, inclusion itself is that practice where you ensure that all individuals, regardless of their differences, regardless of their background, that they are valued, they are respected. Not only that, they are provided with equal opportunities. And the reason for providing the equal opportunities is to help them to fully participate in the society. What you're doing when you're talking about inclusion is that you're creating an environment where everybody is welcome, everybody is accepted, and everybody is supported, regardless of where they are coming from. Now, inclusion is not just, oh, I'm tolerating this person, or, oh, we are being diverse. It is much more than that. Inclusion recognizes unique qualities. It recognizes perceptives. It also takes into consideration the experiences that individuals bring. And this is regardless of their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their age, their disability, their religion, or any other characteristic that we use to separate human beings. So if you think about inclusion, it is not just, oh, well, in my class, I've got a welcome sign in 5 different languages. It is much more than that. Inclusion is the idea that, look, the fact that we are diverse is a strength. The fact that there are different types of people in the world is a strength. And for us, it is embracing that strength, leveraging on the differences so that we open up the opportunities for innovation, for creativity. And that way, what we are doing as a collective is that we are creating a more harmonious society. So inclusion, again, is about removing the barriers that are there. It's taking out the barriers to the strengths that individuals bring. Because you see, where there are barriers, it becomes difficult to demonstrate inclusion. So when we are talking about inclusion, we are looking at providing what we call equity. Equitable access to resources, to opportunities, and to decision-making process by all individuals. So as I'm saying this, I want you to think of your setting. Is it inclusive? Are you taking out barriers? Are you removing those challenges that will stop people from expressing their innovation, those barriers that will stop people from being innovative, being creative? Are you ensuring that your environment is harmonious? Do you know that with inclusion, sometimes it might just be a non-inclusive environment, might just be the way you address somebody, the way you talk about the language, maybe the way you mimic the language, or maybe the way you mimic what they are wearing. All of those things are what we need to think about when we think about inclusion. Now, I want to talk about what the key principles of inclusion are. Next slide, please. Thank you. The key principles of inclusion. So I created this infographic as a way to help us visually remember what the key principles are. Number 1, respect and dignity. When we talk about respect and dignity, it's about valuing individuals, treating them with respect, with dignity, and with fairness. Are you being fair? One of the things I tell the children I teach all the time is when, for example, they do something and I have to give out a consequence, I say to them, I am fair. Because I think that is important for them to understand that what works for A needs to be able to work for B, even if it means I'm adjusting things. The second principle of inclusion is equity. Equity is about ensuring that resources and opportunities are distributed equitably. You are addressing any existing disadvantages and you're looking at what barriers am I taking down. Number 3, participation and engagement. What you're doing with that principle is that you're encouraging active participation. You're looking for active involvement in decision making, in problem solving, and in community activities. Let me give you a really quick example of that participation and engagement. Inclusion understands that not every child in my class is the same, but every child matters. Inclusion understands that everybody does not need to be an extrovert to be able to contribute. Some of us are introverts, and we are happy being introverts. Some of us are social butterflies, and we are happy being social butterflies. And so you, as the educator, is ensuring that, look, you are actively encouraging participation and thinking of ways that you can do this so that there is active involvement and everybody is engaged. How many of us, are you going to type in the chat box now? Because I know we're all teachers here. How many of us have children in our classes that sometimes just disengage? When I say disengage, they're not interested in maths, they're not interested in English, they're not interested in science, they're not interested in whatever you are presenting to them. Just type in the chat box if you do, because I can type in the chat box straight away. I definitely do. Okay, I can see people saying happens a lot. I do, well done. I do, definitely, absolutely. Absolutely. It is a common human trait. In a class of 30, if you can get 80% engagement, that is fantastic. But you see, what we are challenging ourselves to do today is to ensure that all pupils are engaged, all pupils are participating at their level. And then the next thing I want us to think about is collaboration. Of course, we talk a lot about collaboration. Oh, 21st century skills. It is one of those 21st century skills, which is brilliant. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just in case you weren't aware, we are now sitting very firmly in the 21st century. We are no longer about to dip our toes into it. No, we are sitting very firmly within the 21st century. And since we are sitting within the 21st century, then collaboration really, at this point, in our human existence needs to be a way of life. And so when we talk about collaboration, we're looking at promoting collaboration and cooperation among diverse groups. We're looking at fostering that understanding and getting people to understand different perspectives. And you need to, as an educator, you need to understand that my perspective will be different from your perspective. The way I'm seeing something will be different from yours. And it's your ability, inclusion is your ability to understand that, look, although we have different perspectives, we have a common goal. And our common goal is that inclusive environment. And then the last one I want to talk about in terms of key principles of inclusion is education and awareness. And that's the point of this workshop today. Education and awareness. We're promoting education and awareness about diversity, about inclusion, and embracing our differences. Understanding fully that, look, we are all different. And I think of my family. My husband is a social butterfly. He has 1,000 friends. He's friends with the man at the shop. He's friends with the guy who's cleaning the car. He's so friendly. And then I see my children, one is exactly like him. But I am the exact opposite. I'm such an introvert. I'm quite happy to be in a place and I'm just enjoying myself. I'm not sad. No, I'm not. But I'm just happy to be by myself. And so being aware of our differences should be a strength. That, look, we are diverse. And so we are diverse. The fact that we are diverse means that there are things that I can contribute and there are things that the other person can contribute, but together we make a strong team. And so these are the key principles of inclusion. Okay, now in the chat box, I want you to tell me which of these key principles stands out for you. Type in the chat box for me. Which one really resonates with you as we're talking about them now? And then we're going to go into looking at cultural diversity because that really is important for us as a nation. Okay, well done. I see somebody say collaboration is important. Well done. Respect and dignity is coming up quite a lot. Equity and accessibility, fantastic. Well done. Education and awareness, participation and engagement, absolutely. The question I have for you to think about, to ponder about, and I want you to write it down, please. How do you keep all children engaged? How do you ensure that every single child is engaged in your class? All right, so write that down as a reflection question, because by the end of this session, hopefully you can go back to it and really unpick that for yourself. Thank you very much. Wow, you are such an active audience today. I'm so impressed. The chat is blowing up, honestly. Okay, let's move on. Well done, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Right. I can see a question. We're going to come back to those questions at the end. Let's go on to, now what I want us to look at next is cultural diversity. Actually, before we look at that, let's look at some challenges to inclusion, because it'd be quite nice to see what those challenges could be. And so while inclusion is a critical goal, yes, it is. I've already mentioned as I was speaking, I talked about okay. Are we on? I think we might just need to mute some people because we're quite excited. So I've already talked about the barriers that are there, breaking down those barriers. So it's not just, so what are those barriers? Those barriers, I think they are the challenges that, stop inclusion from happening. So as we have the best will in the world, but there are these things that we need to deal with. Okay, so the first one of that is prejudice and bias. Prejudice and bias. Now, I want you to get this. Deep-seated prejudice and bias are based on factors such as race, gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, disability. Those kind of things can hinder inclusion efforts. So for example, these are the things that girls should do, or these are the things that boys should do. And so as a result, we hinder what a girl or a boy can bring in a certain situation. So that's something to be aware of. What are your deep-seated, what we call unconscious bias? What are those unconscious bias? People of this tribe are in a certain way. People of that tribe are a certain way. We find that as teachers, you could even bring this, and it happens a lot. You bring this into the classroom environment because you already have these stereotypes and these biases in your mind. But I'm challenging you today to think about what your unconscious biases are and how you start working on those unconscious biases, because what they could lead to is they could lead to discriminatory attitudes, they could lead to exclusionary practices and unequal treatment, and then you could even have social divisions. The second thing is a lack of awareness and understanding. Many people lack awareness and understanding of the experiences and the needs of people that are marginalized or people that are underrepresented. So, for example, think about your class at the moment. Is it boy heavy or girl heavy? All my life, I've had boy heavy classes. I don't know why. But then I noticed that in a lot of the boy heavy classes I've had, the boys are so powerful, the girls are passive. And that, as a new teacher, it disturbed me a lot. And I had to think of, how do I ensure that my practice is inclusive so that these girls, I know they have great ideas. I need them to be able to speak up. I need them to be able to join in the lessons. I need them to be engaged. And so when you think of that, for somebody that's unaware, you might just think, oh, the boys are great, the girls are not. But that's not the point. Because you see, you have a group that's underrepresented. What are you doing to ensure that that group becomes fairly represented within your environment? And so sometimes lack of awareness is about ignorance, actually. It's about ignorance of cultures, ignorance of disability, and things like this leads to exclusions. The other thing we need to think about is structural bias. And this is where, you hear the word institutional racism, institutional biases. Those things are already within the structure of the organization. Give you a very, very simple example. Think about your school. Is your school physically accessible for everybody? So for example, someone that's maybe using a walking stick, someone that's using a wheelchair, can they access your environment easily? Have you made adaptations for them to be able to come in and out freely without any hindrance. And so you have things like that, and sometimes a lack of representation within people that make the decisions that would move the organization forward. The other thing you need to think about, some of the challenges to achieving inclusion, is socioeconomic factors. So inequality and socioeconomic factors, where there is limited access to quality education. So if there's limited access to quality education, limited access to quality teachers, what do you think would happen? That can't be inclusive. If you think that, within an environment, there's very limited social mobility, for example, children from a particular area never grow up to be something great, that is not inclusive. And then the next thing we want to talk about with challenges in achieving inclusion is the resistance to change. So even as we're talking now, we're going through this, I want you to think, what are those things that you need to change? Or are you resistant to change and you think, no, this is how we've always done it. If this is how we've always done it, then nobody should touch what we've always done. Nobody should, but hang on, the point is, challenge it. If this is how we've always done it, is it including everybody? Is it working for everybody? Are there people that are marginalized? Are there people that you have left out? And so things like this, what we're doing now in having this capacity building and workshop, is to help create inclusive environments. Without this, then there will be no challenge. There will be no way to think about, okay, what are we doing that is not working? And what are we doing that we need to adjust so that we can have inclusive environments? On to the next slide, please. And the other three, previous slide, please, thank you. The next one is lack of resources and support. Again, if there is inadequate resources, all of those things could hinder inclusion. Then you also need to think about what we call intersectionality, which is looking at multiple forms of discrimination, multiple forms of disadvantages. All of those things need to be addressed so that no one is left behind. And of course, the one which I think is really close to heart for us in Nigeria is cultural and language barriers, where we are a melting pot. I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a moment, where we're a melting pot of a variety of cultures and so many different people. It is really easy for some people to be left out because you don't speak my language, you don't speak my language, I'm only going to be interested in those that speak my language. But we cannot create an inclusive environment like that. Okay, now your turn. In the chat, tell me, which challenge to achieving inclusion have you ever experienced? So type in the chat, which one of these have you ever experienced? I'll just list them again really quickly. I talked about prejudice and bias, a lack of awareness and understanding. I talked about structural barriers. I talked about inequality and socioeconomic factors. I've talked about resistance to change. I've talked about lack of resources and supports. I've talked about multiple forms of discriminations. And then finally, cultural and language barriers. Now, type in the chat for me, which ones do you think you have experienced? What are those challenges to inclusion that you have experienced? Thank you very much. I can see, yeah. Lack of resources and support seems to be coming up quite a bit. Okay, that seems to be coming up quite a bit. That's fine. Inequality, socioeconomic factors, I expected that as well. Resistance to change, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not surprised at that. Resistance to change, well done. Okay. Superb. Not anticipating change, lack of resources, language barriers. I think, funny enough, I was expecting that we'll have language barriers quite a lot, cultural and language barriers, because of, the uniqueness of our country. Well done. Keep on coming. Resistance to change. Wow, that's really interesting. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Can we go on to the next slide whilst we have this chat coming in? Thank you. Yep, somebody mentioned religion. Absolutely, absolutely. Because as a country, we are very, very religious, you know. Everybody has a religion that they're following somehow. Okay. Thank you very much. Lovely. Now let's look at inclusion and cultural diversity. Now, I chose to add this because I think it's really important that we understand where we are as a society, how that affects what we're trying to achieve with the education of our children. So when we talk about cultural diversity, we're looking at the existence of several cultures within one society or any group of people. Cultural diversity is not just, okay, we're all wearing different cultural clothes. No, not at all. It is encompassing the beliefs, the customs, the languages, even the art forms, the ways of life. So cultural diversity is a huge, huge thing when we're looking at inclusion. Next slide, please. As a country, we know that we're one of the most diverse countries in the world. Last time I checked, there were over 250 ethnic groups. And not just that, every group has a distinct language, distinct traditional customs. In fact, as a nation, we are what you call a melting pot of various cultures. And you know, while that is such a beautiful thing, it can have its own challenges. And that's what I want us to think about, how we overcome those challenges, how we overcome the barrier so that we can be, we can really achieve this goal of inclusion as we want to. Next slide, please. So within our schools, where you have so many ethnicities, we require an ongoing effort, an ongoing, almost like, the wheel that never stops. It just keeps going. We need the commitment and the collaboration. What we want to do, despite our diverseness, is to create that environment that values people, that respects the differences. I've talked about that before. And then the one I am quite passionate about is an environment that fosters understanding. And I have mentioned already, providing equal opportunities for all our learners to thrive and contribute. And that's really important, because if we are not doing that, then you never know whose great idea you're stopping from blooming. I think that's really important, because sometimes, when you quieten children, or when you silence them, you don't let them talk because of an unconscious bias, because of maybe a lack of awareness, a lack of understanding. There is so much that you may be missing out on. Next slide, please. So what I want to just do here now is stop for a bit and ask you, what questions do you have? Before I'll do a little bit more with the cultural diversity. What questions do you have? What do you think with what we have said? We'll talk about. So the question is, what questions do you have? Now that you look at what is inclusion, what are the barriers? What are the key principles? What are those barriers to inclusion? And I'm beginning to bring it home, because yes, we've talked about inclusion. It's such a great idea. We're bringing it home now, and we're saying, look, we are a diverse nation. We have so many ethnic groups. We have so many languages, so many different cultures. Yet we are all coming together to create that inclusive environment. How do we do this? So type in your questions in the chat, and then we can see if we can address some of the questions before we move on to the next bit. I'm just looking in the chat to see if I can see any of the questions that have come through. All right, somebody asked a question which I think is really good. Taiwo Tokbe, please, ma, how can teachers work on this inclusion in their various classes? We have some children who are slow learners, but teachers don't take their time to work with them. Thank you for that question, Taiwo Tokbe. Now, one of my co-panelists is going to talk in detail about that, and going to answer those kind of questions and look at strategies, okay, for what you could do to help children like that. Okay, I'm just looking at the live chat. Okay, this is a really good question. I'll just answer it live. From Emmanuel Asukwo. Is it necessary to know how to speak the native language of your learners in order to carry them along during lessons? No, it's not. It isn't. I know at the beginning I mentioned the teacher of the year in 2019 who could speak every single language of children in her classroom. All she knew how to say was hello. No, you do not need to know how to speak the language. That is not as important as ensuring that there is equity within your class and you're carrying all of them along. So no, it is not. Okay. Another question, I'll just pick that up. How can a teacher carry along a child who does not want to learn or doesn't have interest? I'd like to answer that question because I get that question all the time, whether I'm talking about inclusion or anything else. So the first question I would ask about that, with that question you've asked me, the question says, how do you carry a child along who does not have any interest? I have a question for you. Have you found out what the child's interest is? Because, a lot of times as teachers, we come into the classroom like, oh, we have this curriculum, we want to deliver. We want to deliver the curriculum like postmen. We want to deliver the curriculum. Have you stopped to think, what kind of learners do I have in front of me? What are they interested in? What makes them excited? What did they do over the weekend? What is that thing I can use to gather their interest to? What is the hook? So that's the first thing I'm going to ask you is, have you found out what that child likes? What is the child interested in? If you can find what the child is interested in, that would really help you. It would help you create a relationship with the child. And then you can use the child's interest as the hook for getting the child interested in the learning. Okay. So the question on a child not interested in learning, I've just given you an example of what you could do with that. Another question from Olayinka Atinuke says, how can a teacher deal with students that are not ready to take advice or change their character after you have tried to talk to the child like a mother to her child? You really shouldn't be doing that. You're a professional. You're not their mom. Why are you trying to be their mom? You're their teacher. You're a professional person. And, first of all, maintain a professional relationship. That's the first thing. The second thing you need to think about is, as I said, what are they interested in? What are they interested in that you can use as a hook to get through to them? That's really vital, because if you don't do that, you are missing a really key, you're missing lots of key opportunities there. I'll give you a very, very quick example of reaching children and developing relationships. So, as you all know, those of you in Nigeria, well, our girl, Hilda Bassi, just, broke the Guinness Book of Record and yada, yada, yada. And that was all over social media and the rest of it. And they made a lot of noise. And of course, when I see those things, the first thing I think about is, how do I bring this into my classroom? And I was teaching a group of children just this morning, and I was explaining to them, I said, did you know this happened over the weekend? They're like, what? Why? Of course, I had YouTube video clips, showed it to them, and they were so fascinated. And then they started telling me about how they've read the Guinness Book of Record and who broke this record the other day and who broke that record the other day. And from that conversation with the children, we then got to write a little bit about Hilda Bassi. What you need to understand is this. If you are not thinking of using the things that are happening within the environment, you're not thinking of getting the children involved and excited about what is going on within the environment, you will struggle to reach them. So, for example, those questions you're asking now about including those children that are not interested in learning, you need to find out, what did they do over the weekend? Because everybody's interested in something. Some children, it might just be reading a book. It might be football, whatever, dancing. Every child is interested in something. Your responsibility as the educator is to find out what tickles your fancy, child. What are you interested in? Okay, remember, you're not a postman. You are an educator. An educator is different from a postman. A postman has no relationship with you but to give you your mails, to deliver your mails. You are not meant to deliver the curriculum. You're meant to pass along the knowledge, building professional relationships with these children, and ensuring that they are making progress in their learning. And I think I'm going to stop there now because my time has just come up. There are still questions, and I'll be answering the questions while my colleagues take over. Over to you, Bumi. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for that. That was an interesting, very interesting session. And I see all the comments and the questions coming through. Your questions will be answered. So just stay around with us. We will get to answering all the questions. Can I just remind us that the Q&A section is meant for questions. So can you please use the Q&A to post your questions and then put your comments. You know, if you're getting, you know, a haha moment from, you know, the training today and you want to put a comment, just put that comment through the comment section, but use the Q&A for your questions. Thank you very much. I think next in line is the next training. We're moving on to the next agenda, the next section, which is part 2, inclusion within the learning environment. And that will be taken by Malia Atta. Malia, over to you.
Hello, hi everyone. It's really an honor to have you all here. And I mean, thank you, Sophia, for introducing inclusion and diversity. I think half of my job is already done. So it's just that my role here would be to make us all understand and reinforce why is it that we are talking about inclusion today here? Why is it important to have it in our workplaces? Why is it that we want it to be a part of our education system, especially our schools and our classroom? So before we get into that, this session would be actually based on, this part actually would be based on a lot of sensitization around what Sophia's just shared, and possibly trying to make the loose end meet to make you better understand what we mean by inclusion and diversity. So if I just move on, oops, I've gone too far. So before we actually move into that, we need to understand diversity before we actually try and attempt to make our classrooms inclusive. We also need to understand what can be classed as diversity. So we'll be going back to what Sophia has just shared with us. And we also need to understand why socialists, educationists, and medical research emphasize on the on addressing inclusion. So to begin with, I will just share a few quotes from the most famous socialist, Martin Luther King Jr. According to him, he says, an individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. So we have to come out of our own situations and think about the broader picture where everyone else is welcomed and everyone else's need is met. The other thing that I have to share is by an educationist, Vygotsky, who's quite popular in the area of education and inclusion, and he advocates the full inclusion model, which states that a student needs should be met in the classroom with the appropriate support delivered to the student. His precise focus was students with specific disabilities, but we can definitely generalize to a broader spectrum of students that we have in a classroom. This leads us to believe that we are all diverse, and at the same time, we are wanting our diversity to be acknowledged and respected if we want our class education system to be run effectively. Now I have this activity for you for which I would like you to respond in the chat box, and I'll see how is it that I can access the chat box to respond to your responses there. It says, if we were to imagine, or if we were to create a list of things that make our students diverse from each other, what would the list have? So I would like you to think back of what Sophia has just shared in terms of if we just create the baseline with the help of thinking around cultural diversity, racial difference, racial diversity, age, gender, and all that, what else would you think about can make your students different? So if you could just take a minute, put your responses in the chat box. I can see that you all know where to put your responses. So this was just for the ones who may have been using the chat box for the first time. So if you could just put your responses in the chat box, that would be lovely. All right, it says family, culture, family background, upbringing, language, exposure, perfect, lovely. Learning environment, values, absolutely. Oh, wow, I've got a very active group, and I can see that you've been good listeners when Sophia was sharing her information. Thank you so much. I think although I gave you a minute to respond, but we've got enough responses here and we can move on to what I have. So all you suggest here is very relevant, but it can be easily classified into broader terms. So if I take this forward and we try and put them into the divisions that we have in terms of what diversity has, or the wide spectrum of diversity that prevails. So we have the common ones on the screen, which is life experiences, gender, personality, race, culture, ethnicity, age. But then we also have opinion around anything. We even need to respect that coming from a student. Then we have physical attributes that need to be respected as well. This could include features. This could include physical appearance of a student, someone who's tall, someone who's short. We even need to be sensitive towards that, acknowledging that and maintaining that respect and for all the students. Then we have something which is quite new and few of you may not be aware of, which is neurodiversity. A lot of people equate it to disability, but it is an ability which has its own spectrum. So we have on one extreme children with ADHD, children with autism, and we can even have children who take longer time to process information. We don't have to classify them into someone who's slow or someone who's not motivated, but we have to acknowledge them. We have to respect that difference of that specific student and make appropriate provisions for them to be accommodated. Then again, we have all the others here. I'm happy for you to take a picture of it and explore this in your own time, but these are the general classification that we have around diversity. So the next thing that I have here is how research supports inclusion. So we have this medical research, which is evidenced by MRIs that were conducted on human brains. And the research suggests that when a person is excluded, the brain's dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which registers physical pain, also feels the social injury. So what you see on the screen, they highlighted the lit up regions of the brain are the ones which are very similar to physical pain, and which would be very similar to if a social exclusion was experienced. Now, research has equated these pain to a cut and a bruise, but depending on the severity of the experience of exclusion, the pain can be equated to that of a broken bone. Considering this, we need to be aware of the fact that exclusion is really hurtful for a child or for an adult equally. So we need to be aware of all these aspects and make our classrooms and education as inclusive as possible. Moving on, I have two case scenarios for you here. What I would like you to do is reflect on what school would be like for one of these students. So pick one of those cases and make notes of the barriers to inclusion that these children may experience and how they could be helped. So if you could just pick one student, analyze it, think about what diversity does this child carry, and how is it that school might be a challenging situation for him or her? And if you were their teacher, how would you minimize that? Think around that and put your response in the chat box. I'll give you a longer time for that so that you can read both of them and choose one to respond. Absolutely. So I can see responses coming in. So I see that this someone has said, Richard says that they may be termed as not serious. They may have racial discrimination. Someone says that. Absolutely. Preach equity, bias. Yes, absolutely. And doesn't the first one also refer to slow? If someone is slow, what diversity or the classification that we've just discussed, what classification would you like to equate it to? All right, so I think I always give you more time than required because you guys are so quick with your responses. Excellent. So I'll just take it from here that the first one says, I'm an 8-year-old Nigerian. I don't understand what my teacher says the first time. I try very hard to follow, but I take longer to understand. I don't like people calling me slow, which includes teacher and students both. Now, in this case, we may want to think about this child. Could he be neurologically diverse? The neurological diversity that we've just discussed. We need to be careful about him or her not being labeled as slow. We may be needing to be careful about considering it to be lack of motivation, someone who's lazy, or someone who's not tending to understand or who's not competent enough to understand the content that is being delivered. So that's possibly the things that we may need to consider while dealing with this kind of a child. The next example that I have here is I'm a Nigerian and I describe myself as an introvert. I love to work quietly and prefer to share ideas once I've had the chance to think very carefully about what I want to say. I always like to write down things and make notes. Now, if we try and reflect on this child, there may be two things that we may have to consider here, that this child is an introvert. So we may not want to push him to be an extrovert. They can, as Sophia said, few are social butterflies. So we don't expect them to become social butterflies. We need to respect their introvertedness by providing them enough time, by possibly not forcing them to work with extrovert, as I've just said. And also what we see here is that the child has a different learning style. So he prefers to write everything down. So we may want to explore the different learning styles that prevail in our classrooms. We have students who are quite visual. There are students who are quite experiential. So they want to experience something and then they learn. So they're quite practical, hands-on activities might be helpful for them. So all these need to be considered when we are maybe planning our content, trying to decide on the appropriate methodologies for delivery of a lesson. So all those things would be worth thinking. So if we want to make our classrooms inclusive, we have to make sure that it's a place where everyone can feel and believe that they're safe and comfortable for being themselves and appreciated for their individual differences. A place where everyone knows that their contribution is valued and their voice will be heard. At this note, we're all aiming to get ourselves sensitized enough to acknowledge our students and their needs as individuals rather than as a group and a whole class. So at this note, I would like to finish off my part, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section, and I will just open that shortly. So someone has asked, how do I cover my curriculum? Curriculum is definitely something that we are all expected to cover and deliver. But then again, these are bits that we want you to consider while deciding the most appropriate method to deliver them. So possibly, just like referring to the second case scenario where the student had a different learning style. So I might want to have a lesson which has some form of writing task associated to it. There may be some visual learners for I may want to have some bits of my lesson, not all of them having the learning styles at one time, but we may have lessons that are differentiated according to the learning styles. Like sometimes you may want the students to draw a mind map while understanding a concept, or you may want something to be, you might want to bring in a practical into the classroom to see how things happen. So those are the kind of things that you could do just to, while you're delivering the same curriculum. It doesn't have to be changed at all. Someone says scene 2 is manageable. So do you think scene 1 wasn't manageable? So do you think slow learning, or someone who's, I wouldn't call it slow learning, but someone who needs more time to process and respond should be given a chance? I wouldn't agree here. I think we may want to differentiate our tasks according to the learners that we have. So not every time, but sometime we will want to slow down the whole process of the lesson so that such students and their needs can be met. And once they get into the wheel or the process, they get better with time. How do I create an inclusive environment in a preschool setting, say for 18 months and 3 years old? I think it's very similar to what we would suggest to all the levels. And I think there it's more like play and learn rather than making it more academic. So learning can be a playful experience for those. And then you can definitely cater to the needs of individual students there. The next question that I have.
Hi, Malia.
Yeah.
Is it okay for me to take questions from the social media pages? We've got some questions come through.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Right. Okay. So on the LinkedIn streaming platform now, a question from Debo Adekambi Adegbaye. How do we handle children with no interest in virtually anything?
I wouldn't say that there is a child who would be virtually not interested in anything. I think if I had this kind of a child, I would personally speak to the child, engage in a dialogue with them to understand what exactly is bothering. I don't think any child may want to shut off completely. There would be reasons. Possibly we are delivering something which is beyond their understanding. We need to simplify instructions. We need to make things easier for them. Possibly again, the student has a different learning style that needs to be understood and catered to. So, I mean, I think this would be needing to be further investigated rather than reaching a conclusion saying that they're not interested.
Thank you very much.
I've answered.
Thank you very much for that. There's another question from LinkedIn from Adewumi Daniel. How can language be a good tool to use in this direction? So I guess basically from what you were explaining, how can language be a tool?
So since I am from the side of language and I teach students who are non-native speakers of English, I think accommodating and all the diverseness that's there in the language. So it was just yesterday that I was sharing with my students. I have university students, by the way. So I was sharing this talk by David Crystal, who precisely says that we have to be tolerant towards the variety of versions that we may have in languages. So I'm talking about English, but that could be applied to the dialects or the regional languages that prevail in your country. So acknowledging that, being patient, and as far as things are understood, I think it's absolutely fine to have a variety of languages. And yeah, that would be another way of communicating that all forms and all versions of languages are welcome.
Right, thank you very much. I'll move on to Facebook now. Are you, is it okay to take one more question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have time.
Okay, so there's a question from Facebook from Ransom Cruz. How can these barriers of inclusion be mitigated in order to get maximum engagement from the students?
I think I've already shared this before, that understanding your students is vital. We don't have to research each individual, but I think with you being with your teacher, your professional judgment would be the first thing that you need to work through. And you being aware of, yes, there are differences. There are differences in personalities, introvert, extroverts. There are differences in students' learning styles. There are differences in students' experiences, and there are differences in cultural environments. So someone with let's say someone with a completely different experience at home, like at the top of my head, I can think of someone who's coming from a broken family and someone who's being looked after really well. Their approach towards learning would be completely different. So I don't recommend you to investigate that first, start investigating into that, but definitely acknowledging that, respecting that, and providing the right kind of supporting environment would be vital here. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Right. I've got another question. In a class of 20, and if we have two students that aren't catching up in the class, is it right for the teacher to slow the curriculum down for these two, to slow it down for the two and for the whole class, or for the teacher to move on with his lesson and possibly try and give an extra class? What would you advise?
I think it's a lovely question, and that's what we are trained as educationists to provide differentiated tasks. So I always get students, few who are quite proficient in English language, and the few who are still not at the same level. So what I usually do is I differentiate tasks, and I would say I lower my expectations. Not that I don't challenge them enough, but I would definitely be more providing them support to achieve the target that I want them to achieve. So those are the kind of things. So when I say differentiating task would be, so for instance, if I have a reading comprehension, let's say, and which has got 10 questions, I would rather just ask them to respond to the 5. And before, for the first 2, I might just...
Sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry.
So, and the first 2, I might sit with them and explain them what is the instructional language of the question. So it's like scaffolding and gradually getting them to the level that we require. So I think it's more work, more planning, but it's not that it's not achievable. It is definitely achievable.
Okay, I've got thanks for answering all these questions. I've got one more from Facebook. And this I presume probably this is not a question, but yeah, it's kind of a question. Let me just ask this. Even though inclusion seems good and interesting, I still believe that some schools should be sent to exclusive schools for some deep challenges. And that's from Jai Benga. Am I right about this?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Even though inclusion seemed good and interesting, I still believe that some should be sent to exclusive schools because of some deep challenges. Am I right to say this?
Yeah, I mean, we do admit that there are challenges, there are barriers, but identifying, we don't say that we can eliminate them completely, but we can minimize them to within the maximum capacity that we can. So I do appreciate that there may be classroom with 50 students, but I'm sure instead of giving individual opportunities to a student, we may group them in according to their capabilities. Not that I'm saying that we label them as fast learners, slow learners, and average learners, but we may have activities that are designed that way sometimes, and at times we have a mixed ability group made. So those are the management aspect that needs to be highlighted and maintained. But it's not that saying that the challenges are more and we may not be able to find any solution for those. So I hope I've answered that, but I personally don't think there is any challenge which cannot be minimized. Eliminating might be a bit of a challenge.
Thank you very much for that. That's all from social media, so you can pick questions from.
All right, so I think my time's up and we have a 10 minutes comfort break. And after that, one of my colleagues, Alice, would be sharing some practical activities and some really good resources that you could use in your classrooms to incorporate inclusion.
We're going to start now for the last section of today, part 3. And we will be looking at practical ideas for an inclusive school environment. So we're breaking it down now to activities that we can do within the classrooms that would create that inclusive classroom environment. And to handle this section, I have our lovely Alice Crayford. Over to you, Alice.
Hi, can you hear me? Is that okay? Am I hearable?
You're mute.
Okay. Oh, am I on mute? Right. Why? Can you hear me now? Is that working? No. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Okay. So
Alice, can hear you. Can anyone, Alice?
Can you not hear me?
Alice, I can hear you. I wonder why Bunny can't hear.
Oh, I don't know, but it sounds like other people can hear me. So for me, I don't know why you can't, but it looks from the chat that everybody else can. So I'm going to just start, and if people can't hear me, maybe put that in the chat and we'll see what's going on. So just very quickly, I'm a teacher and an educational psychologist. I've been teaching for nearly 30 years and an educational psychologist for many a decade as well. So I noticed there was a lot of questions about autism and concentration difficulties and a lot of additional needs, which are really hard. And it's a big challenge when you've got very little resources and you've got a lot of typical developing children, and then you've got children who are neurodiverse. It is a challenge, and I do understand how hard it is. So trying your best is great. Talking to children is always the best way to start. If you're never sure about what can I do, How can I make it better? My first port of call is to talk to the children, because they can often say, actually, if you do this, it would make it a bit better, or talking to the parents, that will, you know, if you did this, it would just make it a little bit easier. So we're obviously from Afrikindness, because there's a lot of science about why kindness is really important educationally. And I think the other important thing that we all want to say is just about sharing kindness, modeling kindness, and being the epitome of kindness really does increase well-being. It improves academic outcomes in primary, in secondary, in university, all over the world, and it does have longitudinal benefits. Dennis, you are. Dennis, could you?
It's mandatory for all of you to open a special platform.
Dennis, can we mute Dennis?
Liz, you're muted now.
So we've got this quote here, and another. Oh, now and another quote here, because one of the resources you will have available is a whole load of inclusion quotes that you could share with your classes. They've put together quote of the day. And it's just a quick, easy way for you to say to you could have a member of your class could share the quote of the day. They could ask everybody who likes this quote, who feels that this quote is meaningful to them, and maybe you could vote on which quote of the day is your favorite for the week, and then you could vote on your favorite quote of the week, quote of the month. And it just helps them feel a little bit more engaged. Their opinion is important, which is what you want with inclusion. You want everybody's opinion to be there. As Sophia was saying, being part of the decision-making process. Diversity is a mix, and inclusion is making the mix work, is part of what the process is. So I have talked about one of the activities, and that is what I'm doing right now. So another one that we do, another activity that you can do, this one comes from, it's called an in-school booklet, which is, I think, 61 pages. So good luck with that one. And what you could do, it's to talk to your children about what inclusion is. It works with any age, really. You could start by giving them a little sticker, not to stick on them, although that might be tricky and they might lose it, or a piece of paper or something where they can get into groups. And so you give them this small piece of paper, and you give one person something slightly different. So you might want to draw a picture on one, or it's a sparkly sticker, or it's a different color to everybody else's. And so you make sure that the one that's different, you give to somebody who's quite happy to who's quite confident and happy to talk about how they feel. And so you give them all out, and then their job is to find people with the same matching color as them. So they wander around and get into groups as quietly as possible. So that you might want them to do it, see if they can do it silently, because that's always harder, and they're using their non-verbal skills, and it's a lot easier for you on the ears. And you can talk about, non-verbal communication being as important with inclusion. And so they then need to get into their groups, their color groups. Once they get into the color groups, some of them will do that quicker than others. So you might want to give them another activity to do, which is get into height order without talking, or get into age order or birthday order, or whatever it is, just while the others are working out. So they're not just standing there. So they're doing something, and then you'll find that there's one left at the end, and so at that point asking, well, what do you notice? And the child with the sticker that was different to everybody else, asking what was it like to not find a group, what were you thinking, how was that for you? And then what about everybody else? How was it that you had a group? How did you feel finding your group? What's it like seeing that one person didn't? And really what you want to do is just bring out those words included and excluded, maybe inclusion, exclusion, and think about the feelings there. What was it like for them? Another why is this not, there we go. Here is just a list of some of the things that we're going to go through. It looks desperately dull like this, but it's because you'll have all these slides. So I'm just the potato activity, one of my favorites, we'll do in just a second. Pair and share I won't talk through with you, but it says it there. It's like think, pair, share, where you think about something, you might do it in the classroom, then you get into pairs. Can you find something similar, and then the two pairs get into fours? Can you find something that's similar about all of you? And then you might want to do that with different groups as well. Mentioned about quote of the day. You might want to have a master calendar of festivals or events from different cultures and faiths, so that you know that you're celebrating that. Oh, I've just done something very strange with my computer. No, there we are. Flag task we'll talk about in the inclusion spiders web. They might want to bring in an object or picture, and certainly nothing they might lose or break that is valuable. Can you talk about it? 5 questions. You might want to link it to some kind of oracy lessons, but something that's interesting and to do with their culture, and then somebody who's seen it, somebody who's aware of it and has that link as well, and showing an interest in somebody who's maybe got a different background. Acknowledging birthdays. They might want to wear personal clothes that day. Human bingo we'll talk about, an acceptance scoot game we'll talk about, I am and I am not, and have you filled a bucket today, are all activities we'll talk about, and then some books, and then some differentiation. So I don't know why my computer is not wanting, there we go, right. So I'm going to introduce to you a very good friend of mine. This is Bob. Now you'll notice Bob is actually just a potato. But the idea is that you will give your class some form of potato. Now I'm going to share with you 2, but they would each have 1. And they would share a few, maybe 2 or 3 facts about their very good friend. So this is Bob. This is Bob, and I'll share his life history. Bob has got 4 brothers and 2 sisters. And back in 1986, Bob won he was 4th prize in the International Disco Dancing Competition. He has had a certificate which he's put above his bed ever since, and he's very proud of that. Since those halcyon days, he now enjoys mountain walking, and he likes to surf as well. So that is Bob. I'm going to introduce to you, oh, can't see on the screen. By my face is better. No, I'm not sure. So this is, I feel like I'm in Harry Potter. Beryl. Now Beryl is she's 19. She's very ambitious, and she wants to be the first potato head of the UN. And for fun, she likes watching films with her friends, and she likes dystopian literature and swimming. So the idea is they all get their potatoes, and they just come up with 2 or 3 random facts. It really doesn't matter. Obviously, they're kind of more ridiculous. It really doesn't matter, as you can see from my nonsense. Put them all into a bag. And then what they do, what you do afterwards is that you put them out in the middle of the classroom, and they need to find their friend. But because their friends are all quite similar, it's actually not as easy as they think. So they've got to know their friend, but then you need to ask them, okay, so you've had a little bit of trouble identifying your potato. Why? What does it tell you about the potatoes? And they'll say that, you know, they are different there, but they are all potatoes. So they actually all are quite similar. They have got, you know, similarities. There are differences, but ultimately they are all the same. And so thinking then, what have we found out about potatoes that link to human beings? That, you know, they are all unique. And that does make the world diverse, but there's a lot of shared characteristics as well. And then thinking about what those shared characteristics of humans might be. Okay, back to the slides. Share screen. Oops, hang on, where it went. Let me see if I can go back. Hang on. Don't know why that's happened. Share.
All right.
Is that okay? Are we okay?
I mean, I was just asking if you need any help. I can share it through my screen. That's all.
Is that working now?
Yeah, it does. We can see it now.
Okay, so next up, is it working as in view slideshow? Is it working? Okay, so next we've got a scoot game. So here we've got, and again, this is all in the pack that you will be able to access. So here you've got 30 boxes and there are 30 statements. Now, there are 30 statements provided for you, but of course you can make your own if you wanted to make them more applicable for your situation, for your class, or you could add some in, or you could take some of them away, just to make them quite unique for your situation. And they go around. Ideally, you would kind of print these out and put them around, maybe around the classroom or outside, and they would just need to decide, is this acceptance? So they'll read the statement. For example, with number 15, doesn't matter where they start. They don't start at 1. They can go around in any way they like, as long as they do all 30. Theo invited a kid to play with him that doesn't have many friends. Is this acceptance? Is it yes or no? And they will circle the answer that they think. So here the idea is that they just think about, is this situation acceptance? With slightly older children, thinking about scenarios and thinking about situations where it's not all about them is quite helpful. So they are then kind of spreading it out a little bit, and they are going beyond their own sphere of experience. So this is that kind of in between there, which might be quite helpful, I hope. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So here we've got the inclusion spider's web. Right, so here I would split a class into maybe groups of about 15 or 20. And if you had a big ball of string, this is what you ideally want, is some kind of problem solving here. So Sophia talked about removing barriers, problem solving, being inherent as part of inclusion. And you don't want them to take the easy option. So the idea is that they get into a circle and one person starts with a string and then they roll it. I mean, if you start throwing it, it gets a little chaotic, but depends how wild you want it to be. You know your kids. Roll it to someone and say what they like about that person, but don't go for the easy option of it's my friend, I know that they like football too. You know, try, if you talk about the problem solving side of it and about trying to find connection when there hasn't obviously been one, then that's a really good way forward. Then they hold on to their string and then they roll it or somehow, you know, get it to somebody else over on the other side of the circle, something they like about that person. They hold on to it, then they roll it or throw it to somebody on the other side of the circle. And what do they like about that person? And that goes on until everyone's got a little piece of the string. So you've got this big spider's web that just connects everyone. And it's a really nice visual activity that shows what a connected class and group you are. And then you need to untangle it. So this is where it gets harder. So they then need to get the ball going the opposite way, the string, and try and roll it up at the same time. But they need to either something that they like about that person or something they have in common with them. I mean, if you think, depending on the age of the children, you might think, right, that's enough. They literally just need to drop it and I'm going to just roll it up. Fine. But if they're a little bit older and you think, yeah, let's take it to the next level, let's try this, it does work. So try and do the untangling as well. So that's just about trying to show what it is that we have in common, and you know, trying to find those things that you might not ordinarily know about or think about. Okay, another thing that Sophia and Malia talked about was about kind of being a team and being a diverse group, and we are always much stronger if we are not all the same. Certainly you don't, in a team, you don't want all the same people that can do all the same things, because that really makes a pretty weak team. So what we want to do here is think about the class as a team, and think about, rather than it being a country and having the flag, it's the class having a flag. So starting with the Nigerian flag, you might think, well, what does it symbolize? And perhaps that the green represents the kind of the wealth of nature and agriculture and the fertile land of Nigeria, with the white representing peace and unity in the River Niger. And so I think, right, as a class, we're going to make our own inclusion flag. We're going to represent inclusion with our flag, and it's going to represent diversity and harmony, and having a think about what that might mean. So in small groups or as a class, you brainstorm, you know, what might help in the class, what might help people feel included. And then each person might decide on maybe their favorite thing or favorite two things in the class that as a group you're good at. And you might put those on the green part of the flag, like the left and right, color it in somehow. And then think of a way that the class or the school could become more inclusive, and you might put that in the middle bit of the flag. So you can see the flag I've got as a picture here, obviously hasn't used the Nigerian flag, but the one that you have has got just a blank Nigerian flag to show. So there's two options here. So the most helpful way that you could become more inclusive as a class, as a school, goes in the middle bit. How would you draw that? How would you represent that? And then maybe along the flagpole, you might want different ideas about how the class might become more inclusive. And it's just another way that you can open up that conversation with them, so that they're not maybe feeling on the spot, but they're able to talk to the person next to them. They're able to have that conversation about, well, what is it that we could do? How could we be more inclusive with this person, or with this culture, or with, you know, with this gender, or whatever it is, when perhaps a direct conversation with their teacher might be too much, but maybe they can do it in this way. So how can we then represent it? And then you've got your class flag, and it's a nice visual thing to have. So this activity is I am, but I am not. So not always straightforward. So this is to have a think about what you are. It's to break down stereotypes and misconceptions. So you start by providing them with a bit of paper, and they divide it into two. And on one side, they'll have I am, and on the other side, they'll have I'm not, with but in the middle. And try and give them 5 minutes to fill in both sides. So what are they? What kind of stereotypes might they come up with? It might be kind of race or gender identity or religion or education background or anything like that. So they fill in both kind of negative and positive stereotypes. And you might find that some of the things are a little bit uncomfortable, but that's okay. What's important then is the conversation that goes with it, and then just seeing, actually, we're all quite diverse. We're not all as kind of maybe monocultural, or all just in one way that we might think of other people. So that isn't always the easiest one, but can result in a bit of conversation. Right, human bingo. Well, this one can take quite a while if you want it to, because we've got, so the ones that you'll be given, you get a colour one, you get a black and white one, and then a blank one. And so the idea here is that they need to just cross off, you'll call cut some of these out, and you call, they cross off if it's them. So you might want to say, okay, likes to tell jokes. And if they think, yeah, that's me, they'll cross that off. And is left-handed, yeah, that's me. Sings every day. Oh no, definitely not. And the first person to get a row or a column shouts bingo. So it's just really about kind of getting to know each other, getting to know things that we might not know about each other, and then forming a connection. So afterwards, then it's like, well, okay, you say you like to tell jokes, right? Come on, do you want to share one with us? They might absolutely not, and particularly not if they're inappropriate. Some of the comments on there were mentioned about some of the inappropriateness, but anyway, it's just about kind of getting to know the class a little bit more, and them getting to know each other a little bit more as well. So do that one, and then why don't they do their own human bingo? What might we want to know about them? What might they want to know about other people? And that can take a while as well. Imagine if you had everyone had done their own. My goodness, that would take forever. You could have that going on. Oh yeah, you'd not be pleased. Okay, so this, you may know this book. It's from Have You Filled a Bucket Today by Carol McLeod, and there's a kind of set of lesson plans. I think in the there's a link to some lesson plans in the connection in the links that you'll get. And what the message is that we fill everybody's invisible kind of internal buckets when we show them respect and kindness. And anytime we're unkind, we dip into it and we take out, and it empties our bucket. And our happiness increases when we treat each other well, and our bucket empties when we treat each other badly. So the idea is then in the link, you will get kind of 24 statements, and you can share them out. And the class then could go along. You'd have a big bucket, an actual bucket, or you could have a picture of a bucket or whatever. And they need to decide, is it a filler activity or is it a dipper activity? So for example, saying good morning to your teacher or classmate, you go, yeah, that's definitely filler. Hurting someone with your hands, oh, that's definitely a dipper. That one comes out. Being disrespectful, that's a dipper activity. Sharing with a friend, oh, that's definitely a filler activity. Hugging a family member or a friend, oh, that's a filler activity. So having a think about what those activities mean. Does it fill your bucket? Does it take away from your bucket? And then having a think about, well, what does it mean in the class? So will you be filling your bucket in? What kind of things do you see that fill your bucket? What kind of things are bucket dipping? And how can we help make sure that people aren't dipping, being bucket dippers? And how can we encourage to be bucket fillers? So it kind of just becomes a bit more of a metaphor that you can use going on, and use in an inclusive sense. And who was a bucket filler today? Who did a bucket filling activity? Who did I see that did a lovely bucket filling task today? And just noticing when somebody was kind or smiled or sharing, and those lovely kind of kind, inclusive things that are noticed, that might be small but actually mean quite a lot. One of the questions earlier was about, I can't quite remember what it was about, but my answer was actually sometimes the smallest thing can mean a lot, and you don't need to do a really big thing for it to make a big difference. And having being listened to, and having someone asking your opinion, having that decision, being part of the decision making in terms of what happens to you, how you're treated, or just being treated respectfully, makes a huge difference. Okay, so I'm going to talk just a little bit about some books that are quite nice to use, some inclusion books. So this one, you can get it online. It's if you don't want to get the actual book, although it's got some nice little windows that you can look through. So Everybody's Welcome. It's about some animals that don't have anywhere to stay, and they all then come together in a den and they're all looked after. It's got some lovely rhyming language and some kind of some nice repetitive language. So it's one of those ones that younger kids like to join in with as well. So that, you know, the message there is that it doesn't matter kind of who you are and what needs you have, but everybody's welcome. So that's a nice one. You might want to do some activities there about, again, depending on the age. I mean, I wouldn't do this with two older kids, but maybe some den making. You might want to, you know, if they're a little bit older, oh, how can we do quite a mathematical? We want to use your maths in it. How can we use our maths, use our rulers, or whatever it is, or how are we going to make a den or a house that will include all the, you know, different animals that they like, just to make it a little bit harder as well, and make sure that everybody's welcome there. And then let's equate that. How can we do that in our classroom? How can we make sure that everybody's welcome in our classroom? And maybe make, in the book, there's little windows. So how can we make little windows like that and make sure that everybody's welcome in our classroom? Another book, The ABC of Equality, is lovely. So obviously each letter has got a kind of 4-line bit about it. And again, that's quite a nice thing to read, and also then maybe for the class to do. So can they do their own ABC of inclusion and equality and kindness? So they can all come up with a letter, some obviously easier than others. But once you've read through it, you know, it can be easier. You might want to do it rhyming, but so that's another option. And so Speak Up as well is that is another option, as well as is The Proudest Blue. And The Proudest Blue is about this girl who is very excited about starting school, and it's the first time she's wearing her hijab, and then she goes to school and it's not all she seems, and it's about how she then kind of works through that. So those, yeah, there's another 2 options there. We've got Everybody Matters, All Are Welcome, and The Skin You Live In as well. Okay, so All Are Welcome, I think it's about going to school. Now, yeah, things are kind of mushing my brain a little bit, but they're, you know, all inclusion related. So Smoky Night is quite a nice one. So I put a couple of the pictures of the book because it's using kind of found objects in it, and a lot of collage. And that's about, so it's for slightly older children, not massively, but that's about a child who sees some rioting and doesn't understand kind of really what's going on, why people are behaving like this, and then the community will come together to look for a cat, and it's about that kind of coming together in quite a tricky time. So Smoky Night is quite a nice one, and again, you could use that to then look at maybe a tricky situation in terms of inclusion, and in terms of maybe a difficult time that they've experienced, or maybe some racism they've experienced, and then how could they just put their experience into this kind of collage, using the kind of arty, the kind of art that is in the book, to show their experiences. The Invisible Boy is another one that is a good book, and on Teachers Pay Teachers. So I can't share this because of the license, but it was for $3 American. There's a set of lesson plans to make it into a game show. So you'd read it, and then in fact, yes, I put it down there. You can make it into a game show, and there's kind of tasks to do and activities to do with that. So that's about a little boy who is pretty invisible, and then he obviously isn't really, but and then makes a friend, and what the experience is like for them. So that's about, you know, including others and empathy as well. So that's well worth having a look at as well. So differentiation. Now, on the questions, there were a few differentiation. I'm just going to stop the slide share for just a second. There were just a few differentiation questions, and it is, oops, hang on a minute. No, I've lost that. Sorry, I don't know what I've done there. No. Hang on. Sorry, can you see me? I don't know what I've done.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, good. Sorry, I've done something with my computer and now I can't see what I'm doing. So differentiation so is a really important part, obviously, of inclusion and allowing everyone to access the teaching and learning. And it's a process that, as you'll know, as teachers, it's about making sure everyone is accommodated with the best chance of maximising their process. Paul gives a metaphor of a bus station, and the classroom's like a bus station because passengers arrive from a montage of backgrounds with very different needs. And the teacher then needs to put the student on the right bus or the correct learning path so that everyone reaches their destination successfully. So without differentiation, academic performance might decrease because you're just putting everybody on the same bus, but actually they are needing to go on a slightly different route, on a slightly different journey. If they're all on the same bus, they're going to likely get frustrated and bored and then disengaged in their learning. And with a more tailored approach, they should be challenged in an appropriate way, and so hopefully would succeed in their own terms. So the benefits, I'm sure you're aware, are in terms of research, it is about improved academic performance. And because if the children are learning at their level and then tested at their level, they're more likely to achieve. They are more engaged. They're much less likely to be bored and frustrated because if they're struggling to cope, it's a very quick way for them to disengage. And if they expect to find it very hard and expect not to understand, expect for the language to just not really make sense to them, very quickly disengage, then we need to look at different ways to do it. How can we make it more visual? How can we make it more interactive for them? If with differentiation, also research shows us children are less stressed because and less anxious as well, which, you know, is very important, and what Bumi was talking about right at the beginning as well, about making sure that we're investing in our children. We don't want these kind of the level of stress and anxiety there. We don't want to make them struggle if it isn't necessary, and we do have a duty to make sure that we are educating them properly and we aren't impacting negatively on their mental health. We want everyone to participate, and I know that isn't always easy because you've got such a wide range of people. But you don't want anyone to be left out as well. So if you can get them to kind of working groups or work with someone else, potentially you can have you know, someone who's higher achieving potentially working with someone who's lower achieving, as long as they aren't taking over the learning, that's and doing it all for them, or taking over the job as a teacher as well. But it can help them be more accepting of difference as well in terms of inclusion. And differentiation puts the learner first, and it is kind of learner-centric, child-centric, which is obviously what we're all about as educators. So it is about valuing the individual. What is it that they can do? What do they want to do? What are they able to do? What are the barriers there? What is stopping them? And it's that kind of first question. What are they interested in? How am I going to engage them? But also, what is the barrier there? What is stopping them? What is making this harder? What is it that is causing them to to sit back and go, I don't want to do this, or I can't do this, or I'm not interested. Okay, why? What is it about how I'm doing this? What is it about the process of what I'm doing that isn't working for you? And sometimes if it's a whole class and you've got the whole class has just decided that it's kind of not with you, then you need to almost park it and start again. And one of the questions was kind of, what do I do with this whole class that is like this? It's a case, and my suggestion there was stop and try and change the dynamic by, for me, it'd be right, we're going to do some kind of learner-centered projects, and the onus is now going to be back on you. You're going to be the ones who are going to be doing the learning, and you're going to start from that point of view. What do you want to do? And just trying to shift it a little bit, rather than it being about you at the front trying to deliver. It's about them. How are they going to learn in a slightly different way? It's not always easy, and differentiation's hard work. There are a lot of websites which are really good for differentiation in terms of the task, and ones that I certainly use, but I'm not sure, you know, what we would need is a whole session on differentiation, I think, rather than just a couple of slides. In terms of, I think what I'm just going to do, no, I've hang on, I'm just going to, oops, share my, am I sharing? New share, oops, hang on a minute. Where are we at? Am I screen sharing now? Can you see? Good thumbs up if you can see what I'm sharing, that would be helpful.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Lovely, thank you. So in terms of different ways of differentiating here, we're looking at, well, what is the outcome that you want? Maybe you can change the outcome, maybe you can change the response. For example, are you going to change the medium? You could have one child doing a monologue, one child writing, one child doing a fact sheet, one child doing some drawing. It might be related to activity. You might want to provide more notes. You might want to provide some little prompt cards. You might want to provide more conversation. And talking is a really important part of learning and part of differentiation as well. Think, pair, share, I talked about before, because if they talk first, they'll be able to kind of learn and think about it, and those neurons in their brains will connect a little bit better as well. Discussing findings, discussing results, really important. Scaffolding, rubrics, filling sheets in, so changing what it is that you're giving them is a really important thing to do as well. And we've got 50 strategies for differentiated learning there, and I'm sure a lot of them are familiar to you. I'm certainly not going to go through them all. You'll have them to have a look at afterwards, but I think my probably my main message with differentiation is try and keep it visual, active, switch it up, talk as well, get them to talk for short amounts of time, keep them active, get them to show you things, yeah, try it and try and fit into their interests as much as you can. So we're getting towards the end of my part. So scaling, we're going to talk about scaling, which is possibly the most useful thing I think I use. So I would like you in the chat box to say, in terms of inclusion, in terms of today, how confident on a scale of 0 to 10 do you feel with inclusion in your classroom? How confident are you? 8 we've got. No, lost some of that. Like, for some reason, that's now not popping up on my screen. Oh, there we are. 8, 9, 10. Good. So we've got some. That's good. Some really nice positive numbers there. I'm glad. I'm glad it's not 1. That's great. I'm very pleased. That's really nice. And what I would then say is, what would you be doing differently? Perhaps, always an important question, if you were 1 point higher. So what might you be doing? A lot of people there put 8. If you were at a 9, what would you be doing differently, perhaps, if you were at a 10? Or if you want to take it away from yourself, you might want to think, which is quite challenging, but it's a very important question. You might think, well, what would you be doing differently? What would your school be doing, or your colleagues be doing differently to help you feel at a 9 or 1 point higher? So I wonder if in the chat, if you can put that, what would you be doing differently? What would other people be doing differently? Put your slide on full screen. Sorry, yes, I will. So we've got more inclusive activities, make a joke in between lessons. It really gets to the introvert and extrovert. More learning strategies, applying strategies learned, but more visual activities. Yeah, being more creative to make room for all. Lovely. There's some really nice answers here. It just is bringing such a sense of positivity and sunshine and energy. It's just lovely. More activities to include them. Understanding diversity in the learning speed, absolutely. Going back to the drawing board with a lot of potatoes, absolutely, yeah, a lot of potatoes. They're great, Bob, very helpful. Brilliant. So I use scaling all the time, and here you can see that I use the word perhaps, so it just takes out any kind of definiteness of having numbers. And if you've got people who are saying, I'm at a 0, you know, and they're being very negative. So for example, I might say, how on a scale of 1 to 10 are you feeling in the classroom? You know, how happy are you? How well do you feel you're learning? Oh, I'm at a 0. Okay, so, you know, what would be, you know, for example, what's keeping it your 0? Why are you not at a -1? Well, I didn't know there'd be a -1. Okay, so what would be different if you were at a 1? What would you be doing differently if you were at a 1? What would be happening if you were at a 1? What would I be doing if you were at a 1? And you're only ever really going up 1 point. You're never asking, what would you be doing differently if you're a 10? Because that's not going to happen. We just want one small change, and that small change will make a difference, and then it can start, other things will start to happen. So don't worry if they start saying I'm at a 0 and there is no good, because you can still turn it around and go, okay, well, tomorrow, let's see, you know, when you're at a 1, what will I notice? What will be different? What will I see when you're at a 1? Well, I'll never be at a 1. Okay, but what, you know, I think you will one day. What would I see if you were at a 1? And that, what am I going to do? And what, but most importantly, what are you going to do differently if you were at a 1? So yeah, that scale of 1 to 10 is I just think a really helpful way of having a conversation and just finding out where they are, what's keeping you there. And rather than, because if they're at a 5 quite often, okay, what's keeping you there? What's good? Because they're not down at the 0. So there's a lot of good there. So let's use more of the good And you could do that with, you know, with colleagues as well, in terms of if they're saying, I'm really struggling with this child and I don't know, and I just feel like I'm not doing anything right and I can't make anything work. Okay, and maybe talk to them. Well, where are you feeling on that scale of 1 to 10? I'm at a 4. Brilliant. Well, what are you doing that's keeping you at that 4? What's everything that's going on that's keeping you there? And there's still a lot there. And what would be happening if you were at a 5? So love a bit of scaling. And just looking at the time, I'm about, and now for some reason, next, there we go. So in terms of, for some of these activities, people can sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable, and it's not about kind of pushing that. We certainly don't want them to feel uncomfortable, and if they want to pass, then that's fine. Sometimes you do have emotions that are quite tricky, because it is about some quite tricky, sticky things that maybe they have felt they've had some bad experiences about in the past. Maybe encouraging children to talk via a worry box, or some form of way they can just put in, you know, kind of a share box. Might being able to kind of share their thoughts is another way of doing that. In my experience, you will no doubt get some ridiculous things in there as well. So as long as you're, you know, aware that goodness knows what might get posted. And the other thing is whether there's a formal way for children to share their thoughts and share. So the likes of a student council, can they say, actually, as a class, we would like this to happen, or we think this would be really helpful for inclusivity, or just doing that in your class. You know, would you like to have a few people just come and talk to me about how we can be more inclusive? Not that it's all going to happen, but it's about that conversation. What do you think? Because they'll have the best ideas about what might work. And you can say, well, that's a lovely idea. It's not going to work in this instance because, but let's think of something else. So they are always a really good resource to ask. Okay, finally, oops, nope, not finally, hang on, gone the wrong way again. So on, I've just asked you this one actually. How confident are you that your classroom is as inclusive as it could be, and how confident are you delivering inclusive activities and encouraging inclusion in your classroom? So if there was a different number, go on, let's have a whole array of numbers throwing out at me. Let's see where we're at and how we feel about this. While you're doing that, in the pack, there's a very small review section, which is about school inclusion. So it's really, we just didn't have time for you to have questions and thoughts about how you would help a school become more inclusive. But that is there as well. One of the questions was, how do I do this with my school? So that's going through the kind of different elements that you might have. For example, what values might you want your school to have? And that might be a place to start. Values, we don't really think about that. They're kind of truisms. And so maybe you might want to say to your head teacher, can we think about the values of our school? Are they really inclusive? How might we change that? What about leadership, management, accountability? What does that look like from the perspective of teachers, children, parents, and obviously the management themselves? What about the curriculum? Does that need any changes? Does that need adaptation? What about pupil engagement? What about the teaching and learning? Does that need adaptation? What about resources? What about pedagogy? Particularly when you're looking at having additional needs in there. You talked about autism. It's not easy. Do you need more resources to be more inclusive? How is that going to be managed within the school? All part of a much wider conversation. What about making assessment more inclusive? How would that happen? How would behaviour management become more inclusive? What would inclusive attitudes to learning look like? How would including parents in the wider community, making them involved, would that improve inclusivity? So there's questions like that as well. Just to end, so at the top of that document, I've included the very well-known proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, because obviously the entire community really need to come together to, you know, to help children experience and grow in a safe environment. And equally, if a child is neglected or is forgotten about, it can have a lifelong effect. And the fact that you are all here, you know, on a Saturday, interacting and really trying and feeling so positive, it looks like, and it's a really lovely energy giving situation. I can't thank you enough for what you've been doing this afternoon. I'm really appreciative, so thank you very much. So I think that's my time up, a little bit over, my apologies. We've got a Q&A now, so if you could put your questions into the Q&A bit, that's it's easier for us to answer there because they don't just disappear. So we've got 10 minutes of that. So let's see what Q&A we can do. What's the best activity to engage other pupils in class when there is a slow learner? Good question. So again, what I would do there is I would do differentiation. So best activities to engage other pupils in class. I would try to change the, I'd differentiate the activities so that the child who finds it harder to learn is still, it depends on you know, at kind of what level they are working, but I would give them something that they can do that is hopefully on the same lines, that they're still learning and they're doing it on something that's linked, but they're doing it at their level. So actually you're doing it with the whole class. It's just the differentiation is so much so that for the child that finds it harder, they're just working at their level. Therefore, you are still teaching everybody, and the child who finds it harder is you know, you'll just need to kind of pick out the key things for them again, and just maybe go over to them. You know, this is what I wanted you to learn. This is what I wanted you to remember. This is now some a little activity for you to do. So you're not having to take yourself away from it too much. How could a worry box be achieved in a preschool class? Let's say where the learners can't. Well, I wouldn't do it in a preschool class because that doesn't work. So I'd say in preschool they are very pretty chatty, and what I might do there though is use pictures. So if they might understand in terms of a worry box, are you worried about? And so I might have you know, a smiley face, a neutral face, and a sad face. How are you feeling today? Or how do you feel about this activity? And they could point to it, or they could stick it onto something. And so I would use, yeah, I'd use pictures and ask them that way, would be my thing. And you can tell with preschool if they're worried or not, usually. And I think I think their behavior tells you more than anything, actually. How do you manage students who aren't open or don't know how to express themselves? Again, another interesting questions. And I think some of that is trust, and a lot of it is about culture, and a lot of it is about finding a way that they will be able to talk. So maybe I find scaling actually quite useful because you're putting it down, you're asking them to do a number. And I think I've never had a child who wouldn't come up with a number. If I said, you know, I ask a question and where are you on this? Or, you know, or smiley faces, they might be pre the point of understanding, you know, 0 to 10. So I'd do a smiley face, 3 or 5 smiley faces. So just some questions, very closed questions at that point about how, you know, what it is that you're wanting to find out. And you might need to start slowly and just kind of work up to the bigger questions a little bit. Another thing I think I often do then is talk to parents as well, because they're more likely to express themselves to their parents, and you can find out more then. So I would do that. I would sometimes talk to them and give them a guess. If they're quite young, I might use a transitional object. So not a potato, but something like a puppet, for example. If they were quite young, I might want to, talk through the puppet and do it that way. But I wouldn't do that if they were, beyond preschool. Yeah, okay. Let's have a look. How can I handle a child when teaching? He understands, when teaching he understands, but given a test or exam, he's forgotten everything. Okay, that's so frustrating. I really understand. So there, it's kind of memory issues. So memory is interesting in that you've got your working memory, and you need to encode it to go into your longer term memory, and you've got your visual memory and you've got your verbal memory. So ideally you want to make sure that the encoding into your memory goes visually and verbally. So you might want them to talk, you certainly want them to see, you remember more visually. Your memory is much better visually than it is verbally. So number one, you want to make sure that key information is always backed up visually. For example, if I said the word house to you, you'd probably think of an image of a house rather than the word house. So you want it to be very visual, first of all, when you're encoding. You want it to try to go through different modalities. So you want it to, you want it to have been encoded in different ways. So have they done something to do with the learning? Have they talked about it? Have they certainly heard about it? Have they seen something? Repetition is another really important thing, particularly with kids with memory difficulties. And in the chat earlier, or a question earlier, I mentioned retrieval practice. So which is a really fundamental thing to do to keep reminding kids. So maybe kind of 5 minutes at the beginning of a lesson doing some retrieval activity. www.retrievalpractice.org, I think it's Pooja Agarwal, has got a really good website with lots of retrieval practice activities and ideas of ways that you can just do very kind of quick, easy bits of retrieval. For example, I would always do, like in a maths lesson, I would do like daily maths, and we'd just go through some kind of, here's some 5 problems, or so that was when I was doing primary. I also taught in secondary as well, and then I'd say, here's something that we looked at last week, something we looked at last month, and something we looked at earlier in the year, and just very quickly, what can you tell me about this? So just trying to remember those things, so I would do a lot of retrieval practice, because if they don't go over it enough in terms of their brain, the connections they're just withering away, and the more the connections are made, and then and the thought is happening, the stronger they get. So it's about repetition, but in different and interesting ways, so they're paying attention, because if it's always the same, they're not going to pay attention, therefore you may as well not do it. Again, memory memory and revision is a whole nother session we could do. Right, how can I teach a child who has no interest in learning? So obviously Sophia Aliya talked about finding out what has interested them and what interests them. I would start with a conversation with them about, what is it? What's going on? Because you are not interested. Fine. What is it? Kind of what is it that you want to do? Why are you not interested? What is it about the process that is not interesting? What do you not like? And if I was to change something, what could I change to make it slightly better? And so if I'm going to change something to make it slightly better, what can you do to make it slightly better? I'd also be looking a bit more holistically, what's gone on? What is there something that's gone on in terms of family, in terms of situation? Is there some form of trauma potentially? Is there some kind of situation that means they're not able to really focus? Is that something that needs attention and looking at? Is there some form of learning need as well, that they're just finding it really hard and therefore they're going, I'm not doing this because it's just not working for me? Is it that they're bored? Is it that they want to do something else? Is it that so I would start by talking to them, talk to their parents, and then for me, the best way to encourage a child is to then, it's about encouraging. So what is it that is actually, what would encourage you? What kind of small thing would make you go, actually, okay, that's worth my time, that's worth my effort. If I do that, it's worth it. So let's find a small manageable activity. And when you've done that, are you then going to play? Are you then going to have a bit of time off? Are you then going to show the class your love of something? So it's that carrot, not necessarily carrot and stick, but what is it that the carrot there? What is it that they really want to do? And then trying to bring that in. What is it about the process of what's going on that's not working for them as well? So there's in a way there's so many questions around your question, because it's a very broad, and often I would need to go down a much more individual route to find out what the situation is, but that would be my kind of broad answer at the moment. How can one handle a teacher who is resistant to change? Now, that's another interesting question. And I'm guessing that teacher may be a little older, because as we get older, even though the evidence may be very clear, it becomes much harder for us to change our fundamental values. I am absolutely not saying older teachers. I am also myself far from a spring chicken. But you can, with some teachers, they can get quite stuck in their groove, and it can be, give them all the evidence in the world, and it can be very hard to get them out of it. It is a hard one, and in terms of management, yes, I know, and I've tried quite a lot of things there, and I think in a way it's a little bit like, with kids, it's that carrot and stick as well. It's about, let's be very supportive. How are we going to help you make those changes? What is it that you need to make those changes? Because this is your job. This is what you are being paid to do, and you do need to do it. And so we'll give you all the support in the world. And if you are not going to do it, well, you are ultimately not doing your job. So how, that is another kind of management, fairly fundamental question. In a slightly different way, it's about a lot of it's about human rights as well, and about the equality. It is that kind of fundamental human right that children should be being educated. They have got that right, and it is the teacher's job to do that. And do they need to have a little bit of a team teach? Do we need to support them in a different way? Again, it's a little bit of a sticky one there. I would what I've done is then kind of gone in with them and gone and done some, right, this is how we're going to do it, and now I want to see you doing it. Obviously it's not massively popular, but they see, if they see you getting in there and getting your hands dirty, saying, right, I'm doing this with you, this is very possible, and hopefully that might kind of bring them along a little bit. But I think it's a much bigger, stickier conversation there, really. I'm looking at the time, and I think I might be handing over. Is that right, Bumi?
Yes, please.
Great.
Thank you very much. That is indeed another wonderful session. Thank you very much, Alice. While you were doing that, there were, so many comments, so many questions coming in. So thank you, even on the social media platform as well. Thank you very much. And thanks to the participants for engaging very well with this. So we're moving on to the closing aspects of this workshop. I hope you found this workshop very informative and you've picked up a couple of learnings from it. I guess the answer will be yes, because I've seen a lot through the comment section. What I'll just want us to do within the next few seconds is, can you just pop into the chat your views as regards to the training workshop this afternoon, and just give a thumbs up to the panelists as well, the facilitators, for a brilliant job putting together all these resources and delivering a spectacular, a wonderful educational session. So can we just give them a round of applause, a thumbs up, a cheer, blow a kiss if you want to. Right. While we're at that, we will be moving to the next, which is going to be the last on our agenda, which is the closing remarks, and then we'll finally close for today. And to do that, I will be bringing on board the NAPS President's Chief, Yomi Otubela. Sir, are you here with us?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Wonderful day by all the speakers, from the first to the last speakers. It has been very impactful. I want to say a very big thanks to everyone that has made this possible for all of us. I could summarize all we've gotten today to include the fact that even though every child have different wired makeup, attitude, and a personality, every child matters. And I must also say here that as we are preaching inclusiveness, we should also add to it that the educators, teaching staff that make up the team that build these children for the impact in our world are as important as the children too. And the inclusiveness does not leave anyone behind, including to me today. It is on that note that I want to say that on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the National Executive Council, throughout the state of the Federation, that I appreciate all the gentlemen of the press, our partners, the participants training workshop being hosted by the National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools Nigeria in partnership with Afrikindness UK. All your attention and contributions are well noted and appreciated too. Equally, I appreciate our partners. The memory will linger for a very long time. Kindly note that our partnership with Afrikindness goes beyond this particular workshop program, as it is well encompassed other to assist the growth and development of education and private education in particular in the country and beyond. Similarly, as we look forward to marking the 20th, excited to inform you that Afrikindness UK will also be offering technical support as the panel of judges to grade the essay competition submitted for this year's NAPS, as it is contribution towards investing in the future of the children, because investing in our children is an investment in our future. and quality grading. Remember that several prizes like laptops, cash, t-shirts, and other numerous prizes are to be won. For more information, NAPS, as a forward-looking association, will continue to collaborate with Afrikindness UK and other organizations to impact Nigeria education space for affordable and regarding the welfare of great educators and to ensure thorough inclusiveness. NAPS has concluded plans in partnership with federal government of Nigeria as well as the state government to assist interested educators to own modern and affordable houses through the intervention programs tagged NAPS Cooperative Housing Scheme. We encourage educators to look out for more information on this through our offices in different states, zone, and local government of the Federation, and key into this laudable scheme. This affordable housing scheme will be available in all the states of the Federation where we have sufficient educators that key into the NAPS National Multi-Purpose Cooperative Society through the local government and states. You may click on the link added below for detail. I therefore assure you that NAPS has also lined up other capacity building programs that are meant to expose amazing educators, supportive parents, awesome learners, and committed members. Some of the hybrid workshops will focus on the new trends in education, such as digitalization, modern parenting techniques, the use of artificial intelligence in learning, appropriate ways to maintain discipline among the Z generation in the school system, and staff welfare packages, among others. We therefore encourage you all to look for more information concerning our programs on our website, napsnigeria.com.ng. We also use this medium to call on both federal and state government to continue partnering with NAPS to create an enabling environment through friendly policies that will encourage private education to flourish side by side with the state institutions counterparts in the country, as it is becoming more glaring that government alone cannot shoulder the responsibility of providing quality education to our citizens. Let me appreciate our amazing educators for their commitment to improving learning. I appreciate our great friends from the media who have always, and I must tender our apology for getting to you late. I appreciate our various stakeholders from the government and our esteemed parents for gracing this workshop. Afrikindness UK for giving us worthwhile experiences through this inspiring workshop. To put it succinctly, we had an awesome engagement. I'm particularly grateful to Children's Day Committee for their success of this project. May God bless you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, sir, for that wonderful closing remarks. And thank you so very much for giving us this opportunity to be able to do this workshop. Actually, we really appreciate it. So thank you very much. And so we come to the close of today. Thank you to our facilitators, Alice, Malia, and Sophia. I also want to acknowledge one of our board of trustees she's been with us from the very beginning of the session, answering almost all your questions. So thank you so very much to Ann Palmer, our trustee, for today. Han, do you want to just say something, please?
I feel like we have been to the moon and back. I could just listen to this for another 3 hours, but what an awesome experience. And to get so many fantastic professionals together, what more could we need? We just need more of this. And, you know, we look forward to collaboration in the future. So proud of everybody today. You know, the young people are our future. And by training together, we're going to make ourselves better, but also we know that the world is going to be a better place also. So thank you very much, everybody. It's been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you so very much. And that is a very good way to close. Thank you so very much, everyone. Just a reminder, we will be sending out the recordings, the video recordings. So if you registered, I know we had over 1,700 of you registered. We will send the video recordings to yourself. I also acknowledge the fact that some of you couldn't get on to the Zoom or to any of the live streaming platform because of network. That is one of the challenges which we understand in Nigeria. So because of that, we'll be sending out the recordings as well. We'll be sending out the presentation slides to everyone. We would also be sending out a post-training survey for everyone to fill. Please complete that post-training survey because that would be a requirement for you receiving the certificate from us. And thank you so very much. If you have any further questions, you're probably taking time out to reflect on today's session and you have questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to us, send us an email. Our email is info@afrikindness.com, or reach out to us via any of our social media platforms. I have dropped those platforms on the chat groups in different areas, so you can reach out to us via LinkedIn, via Facebook, or via Twitter, and we will respond accordingly. All I would just say is this is the very beginning. We have a lot more in store in collaboration with NABS, and we will be supporting the supporting every educators and teachers out there, not just in Africa, not just in Nigeria, but also in Africa. And we will all work together to make an impact for the children and the young people who we say they are our future. Absolutely. So thank you very much and have a very good evening. Thank you.